Hey guys. Okay, so yesterday I told you we were doing water today. So what I've done is I've come underneath my staircase because that's where I store my water. A lot of food storage preparedness is about making use of your little nooks and crannies. It's not about having a big shed to put your food storage in. It's not about having a specialized root cellar to put your spuds in. So this is where I store my water. I have some conventional 5-gallon jugs of water, but then I also have the oil jugs from Azure Standard, if you can see that. So with these ones, they're very, very thin plastic. And so you have to keep the original boxes that they come in. They don't stack without the boxes. They don't stay upright without the boxes. So what I do is when I get these guys from Azure Standard, I don't remember how much they are. My mom got them for me. They're like $3 or $5. These normal ones that'll stack on their own, we got those from the Army surplus store, and they used to be like $5 a piece. They're like 15 or something now, or even more. So that's why the Azure Standard ones work just fine. Again, they had oil in them. These ones had rice bran oil in them. And so what I did is I put baking soda, probably about a 1/4 cup of baking soda inside. Well, first things first, I took it out of the box. So I took it out of the box so that the box wasn't getting wet when I was washing the inside container. So these come from Azure Standard. They're very inexpensive. They're thin plastic, but as long as the box remains intact and you can put it back in it, you're good. So I removed the plastic jug from the box. I put a 1/4 cup of baking soda in, and I let it kind of settle a little bit into the little bit of oil residue in the bottom. And then I pour a little bit of water in, swish it around, pour it into my compost bucket, and then put a little more water in, swish it around, and put it in my compost bucket. After that, after I have most of the oil soaked up by baking soda and then rinsed out with just a tiny bit of water, it doesn't take very much, like a cup of water is all. Then I put a little squirt of dish soap in it. I put a little water in, I shake it around, shake it around, shake it around, get rid of that. I use very, very minimal amounts of water to clean these. Mostly I use a little baking soda, a little bit of soap. So once I'm finished, I put the container back into the cardboard box. Hey, Julia. Hey, Benjamin. Hey, Robert. Oh, I'm so glad they've been helpful. Yeah, I hear you about the biodiesel for sure. So remind me of that later when on a different day, I'm going to be talking about fats and oils. So remind me about the biodiesel and the oil on the day that I talk about oils. I don't remember where my paper went. See if I can find it. But anyway, on a different day, we're doing oils. So once I have the jug clean, I completely dry it off on the outside. I don't want to get the cardboard wet. So then I put the jug inside the cardboard, and in a very dry spot next to my sink, I put it, and then I use the hose from my sink, and I stick it inside the water jug, and I fill it up almost all the way. And then I put in a 1/4 teaspoon of normal bleach, normal chlorine, Clorox bleach. And then I put the lid on, and then I have the kids take it downstairs and we stack it. Now, as far as chlorine goes, we're going to talk about that next because a lot of people want to be able to sterilize things with Clorox and chlorine. Hey, Tony Renee. Yeah, I did the baking soda to clean out the inside because the baking soda will absorb the oil, and you're not fighting the oil if you use the baking soda. Hey, the color drop. How are you? And Robert. Okay, so I want to talk about Clorox. Liquid chlorine bleach has an expiration date. After a few years, it doesn't work as a sterilizer anymore. So this is my personal opinion. Please do your own research. This is Clear Spa chlorinating granules, and it doesn't have any other additives. Okay. I think it's for hot tubs. I don't know if it's Pool Shock. I don't think it's Pool Shock, but maybe it is. You want to get something that doesn't have any additives in it if you're going to do this. And then when you use the granules, what you're going to make is a dilution of a dilution. So you take your, after you've done your research, I'm not going to tell you what the ratios are. You take your teeny tiny, minuscule, tiny amount of these granules, you put them in a gallon jug of water, you shake that, and then what you put into your actual drinking water is like a teaspoon of that dilution. So dilution of a dilution. So I'm going to let you guys do that research, but this is what we keep on hand because liquid chlorine does not sterilize after a few years. It doesn't work anymore. We also have a 50-gallon drum for water. That one is not full right now. Just putting it out there. It was very easy for me to fill up these small ones, but I wasn't sure how to fill up the big one. And so that one is waiting for John to fill up. In the past, what we have done is we've taken a food grade RV hose that we could attach to a sink in the basement, and we've used that to fill these up. What you could also do is just get pitchers, put this where you want it, get pitchers and pour it in. With these 55-gallon drums, you need a kerosene hand pump. Does that make sense? A kerosene liquid pump. They have like this accordion thing on the top and this really long tube in the bottom, and then they have a hose that comes out the side. And the reason you need one of those is because you can't get the water out of these guys without that pump. You need a little hand pump. And I believe my parents always used a kerosene hand pump. So if you guys can see, the problem with the location on this one is that we can't actually access it. You see how it's underneath the stairs, which would block us from being able to get a pump into it. So that's how you know it's empty. But it's a good thing to have. We can get it at our local feed supply stores. Make sure that you're getting a food grade 50-gallon drum if that's what you're going to do. We like to have the 50-gallon ones plus the 5-gallon ones because these are so easy to move. In an off-grid situation, you can pick up one of these 5-gallon water containers, take it up and put it on your sink to use for washing. Now, I have other things here that I want to show you, but remind me to go back to telling you about hygiene, emergency water hygiene. It's very important. But I'm kind of going to talk about purification first. So this is a water purification system. I have a smaller version of this in my car. In my emergency kit in my car, I have a little handheld one that works, but this is meant for more of a high volume situation. And the reason for that is that maybe you have rainwater, maybe you have a stream next to your house, maybe you live next to a lake, and you don't have a pump on your well, you don't have a hand pump on your well, your water, your electricity has been turned off. How are you going to get water? So you need multiple layers of water source, if that makes sense. And so something like this is great for the home, and then something in my car so that if I was stranded somewhere and I had a source of water but it wasn't clean, I could use it. Along with that, you need to make sure in your car you have a container to filter the water into. So we have canteens, empty canteens, because it freezes here in the winter, empty canteens of water in our emergency kit so that when we need to filter water, we have something to catch it with. The next thing I have is my Berkey filters. We do have a Berkey. When we were out in the off-grid cabin, we did use a Berkey for all of our water because we were hauling it from the hand pump to the house, and we just a little extra layer of sterilization is great. And so I have multiple Berkey water filters, a siphon pump. Let's see. Hobby Woodworker said, when I lived near a large Italian and Greek community, I could go to their large deli markets and get empty 220-liter gallon plastic barrels. Yes, that's what has been stored in these is pickles. And so they used to be like $20 a piece. Now they're $40 a piece. And I think previously we had 4 of them, and where they sat was 1, 2, 3, 4 here in this walkway in the closet. What do you need, honey?
Some of the rods are oddly shaped, and they're going to make the wood stack.
Okay, then just stack it next to the palette. Okay, thank you, honey. Thanks for asking. Okay, go eat your breakfast, but please eat what Dad cooked for you. Don't make something new. Okay? No, don't close it, please. Okay, next thing is boiling water. You need to have a pan. You need to have a source of fuel to be able to boil water. When we lived in the off-grid cabin, we would boil water for hygiene. We would boil water for tea. We would boil water for when we were doing laundry. And so it's important for your water to have a way to heat your water. And when you're doing something that is a larger amount of water, what you do is you take your cold water and you pour boiling water into it to get it to the temperature you want. If what you do is you put a massive pot of water on your heat source and you try to bring that to temperature, you're wasting your fuel. What you do instead is you put your water in your big container, you boil a small amount of water, very little fuel for that, small, tiny amount of water, you pour the boiling water until it's up to temperature. And that's how you heat water for things like hygiene. And so now we're going to go on to the next thing, your quantity of water. So if you're actually in a situation where you don't have electricity and the only water you have is what you have stored, you are not taking baths, you are not taking showers, you are not washing dishes. You're not doing it. What you're doing instead is that up in your sink, you're taking a bowl of water and you're putting it in your sink and you're pouring water into it and you're putting a tiny bit of chlorine in it, just a tiny bit of chlorine. And everybody's going to wash their hands in that first to get all the visible dirt off in the same bowl of water. Everybody's going to wash their hands throughout the day. And then what you're going to do is you're going to have something like a pump, a weed sprayer that's clean, that's never been used for weed spray. You're going to have it next to your sink. You're going to put your water into it. And after everybody's got all the visible dirt off their hands, they're going to pump up the weed sprayer and they're going to spray their hands off for that final little rinse. And it uses like, I don't know, 2 tablespoons of water to do that. And that way, after everybody has washed their hands and the bowl of water is dirty, you can dump that down the sink. You can pour a little bit more water in for the next part of the day. And that way for your hygiene needs, just for hand washing, you're only going through about 2 quarts, maybe a gallon of water a day for hygiene needs. Now, you're not going to be flushing toilets, so you need some kind of composting system or way of getting rid of waste. What we like to do is have a 5-gallon bucket and some sawdust, or you can use newspaper shreds, or you can use, what else can you use? You could use leaves. You need some source of carbon, and you're going to make a mini hotbed with your poop in a 5-gallon bucket. You're going to put carbon down. You guys can poop and pee into that bucket. They make lids that fit directly onto a 5-gallon bucket so that you can sit on it if that's what you need to do, if you can't balance. You're not going to mess with all the, unless you maybe live in an apartment and you have somewhere to get rid of the waste, you're not going to put it in like a garbage sack or anything. No need to do that. You're just going to go dig a hole in the backyard, a big hole in the backyard, and put a piece of plywood over the top with a rock on top. Not an outhouse. You can still go to the bathroom in the house. None of your neighbors need to know what's going on, but it'll keep you guys from getting sick. You don't want to waste your water on bathroom things. The next thing, I'm trying to help you guys conserve your water, so that's why we're talking about things this way. The next thing you want to do is have a lot of wet wipes or washcloths. And when you do have something that needs to happen with hygiene, you're going to use wet wipes or you're going to use a damp washcloth. And so when you're getting like your armpits and everything, you could use a washcloth. When you're doing your bottom and your crotch, you're going to use wet wipes. And you're just not going to worry about showering because if you're concerned about having water to drink, you're not going to be using water for hygiene. If you have a source of water that is continual, like a hand pump on your well, that's different. And you still don't want to be taking long showers because it's hard to haul that water back and forth. That's where the weed sprayer comes in. All right, I'm going to read some of these comments and then we'll go back to what we were doing. Half-Ass Ranch said, the topic of water is scary for us. Until we get our catchment system, we rely on hauling every drop of water into our tanks and cistern. Yeah, it's a thing. It's legitimate. It's a thing. For us in our area, we don't get enough rainfall to be able to do something like a cistern. And so we have a hand pump on our well. It was not expensive. It was $300. It was done by a local. They're called Liberty Pumps. I don't know if they still make them, but here in, it's Manan, Idaho is where they come from. It's called a Liberty Pump. And it can do, I think if I remember right, it can go down to 300 feet, but it works great. You pump it. If you guys see any of our off-grid videos, you'll see Kaya, my little, how old was she at the time? 6. She was the one that pumped all of our water. And so I have videos out there showing how to use it. And again, it was $300. And she does, I believe, make a kit now that can be shipped. So look into that if you're interested. Okay. Southern Bella Homestead, my friend from Georgia. How do you get the pickle smell out? You don't. You can buy, brand new food grade tubs. They're just more expensive than the secondhand ones that have the pickles in them. But when you're in a situation where your power is actually out and you're depending on it, the pickle smell is like the least of your concern, if that makes sense. Yeah. All right. Good morning. Good morning. Hobby Woodworker said Human Manure Handbook has been updated and republished quite a few times. A good source to teach you how to compost your soil. Exactly. So for us, we did one where we actually dug a hole instead of having like an up above ground composting system. What we did instead is we did dig a hole and we built a little outhouse over it. And we have sawdust or paper, some kind of carbon that we use to layer. And then if you're going to be, and it means you just don't have to touch anything. You just go and you dump it because it has carbon in it. It breaks down very, very quickly. It absorbs ammonia. It doesn't smell bad. You really don't want to be messing with the plastic bags and the garbage sacks inside the bucket because you're having to touch it. And then if it's inside the plastic bag, it can't breathe and it can't break down and it stinks. And so if garbage service is down, it means that you have maybe this very large amount of human waste in plastic bags where it can't breathe. It never breaks down. And then you do have a disease issue because eventually you're going to have to touch it. And if it's in plastic, plastic isn't going to let it break down. What you want instead is you want a hole in the ground, or if you want to do it like the Human Manure people do, which is an above the ground system, you want carbon and manure, and then you dig a new hole when that one's filled, and you cover that one with soil and make sure it can break down. But because it has carbon in it, it can break down. All right, Katie Moyer said Dairy Queen has great food containers. They sell for 25 to 50 cents. Is that a big food container like a bucket? Jennifer said, I'd like a composting outhouse to try it out. Yeah. So our Airbnbers, during the actual beginning of the quarantine, we had Airbnbers here. And one of them had lost her job. And so she and her boyfriend were here. And they built all sorts of things. And we paid them to do it because, we were kind of like a little family at the time. And they made us an amazing little outhouse out of repurposed lumber. And it's a beautiful little thing. And it's movable. And so that's kind of a fun family project. But make sure to do your research and don't spend $20,000 on it. Try to keep it affordable. Julie Wolf said pickle smells are not fatal. It's only vinegar. Yeah, it's kind of irritating. It's an irritating smell when you're cooking with it. But for us, I'd rather spend like $20 or $40 on a barrel rather than like $80 on a barrel or $100 on a barrel, and then have it smell a little bit like pickles. Isn't such a big deal. Farmer Brad said, what do I Google for Liberty Pump? It looks like a large corporation website. Okay, so Liberty Pump is an in-ground hand pump, and it's located in Manan, Idaho. Or at least it used to be. I hope that she's still in business. They do a great job. And I know that they were working really hard on getting a shippable system. So again, for water storage, you find your little nooks and crannies. You don't store water high, you store it low because it's very heavy. And so this is the space underneath our stairs. That one doesn't belong there. That's empty. And that's why you see it there, is because you wouldn't be able to access it. You don't want to fill it up underneath something that keeps you from accessing it. Instead, it actually belongs here in the walkway. And you also need a pump somebody called it a siphon pump. I always think of it as like a kerosene pump, little kerosene hand pump with the little accordion on the top. You need something like that to be able to get the water back out again. And okay, so for those of you who missed at the beginning of the live stream, I did cover all of these other options like filters and Berkeys and something kind of like a pool shock, but you have to make sure it doesn't have additives, and you have to be very careful in you dilute first and then you dilute again when using this kind of thing. Because your normal chlorine, your liquid chlorine has an expiration date. It does not continue to work past a few years. So there's that. These ones came from Azure Standard. You have to make sure that the cardboard box stays intact. Otherwise, you can't stack them. They bulge at the sides, but these are a very inexpensive way to get water storage. And I did talk in the beginning about how it is that you get these clean without using too much water. And I like to have both the big ones and the small ones, and then I also have a hand pump. So for those of you who don't know, we lived off-grid in our little shed cabin for 3 summers while John was in school. And the reason we did that was because we had renters here in the house, and they didn't know how to keep everything watered and taken care of as far as fruit trees. I didn't want to lose my fruit trees, and so we came back in the summer and we lived in the off-grid cabin. During that time, we learned an awful lot about water off-grid. Okay, so B himself asked, what about using bleach to purify water? Yes, you can use bleach. When I did these, when I filled these, after I cleaned them thoroughly and filled them, I used a 1/4 teaspoon of bleach in these containers. However, liquid bleach is not valid after a few years. It actually loses its potency. It cannot sterilize things anymore after a certain amount of time. And so for long-term storage, these are chlorinating granules. You want to make sure that they don't have any other ingredients, that they don't have any perfumes or anything else in it. And then what you do is you dilute a very, very tiny, tiny amount into a 1-gallon jug, and that's your liquid chlorine at this point. And then you dilute that down again to put into like a teaspoon of that dilution. And don't quote me on that. I don't know what the number is. I don't think it's a teaspoon, but I'm giving you a for instance. You have your gallon of dilution from these granules, a gallon of dilution, very, very tiny amount of granules. This one is shelf stable forever. The liquid bleach is not shelf stable forever. After a few years, it stops working. It's just water. It's just water at that point. All right, so it's really important to do your research about what things have a long shelf life and what things have a short shelf life. Liquid chlorine bleach has a very short shelf life. Katie said DQ has a number of sizes. I like the gallon glass cherry containers best. They have a variety of sizes and materials. I bring them eggs in the spring with my number. I pick them up and go to town. I love that. What a great idea. One thing you can do is you can actually store water in glass containers. Like if you're doing a batch of canning, you can, and you don't have quite enough jars to go in. One thing that you do is you fill up extra jars with water and put them in so that there's not clinking inside your canning. If they don't fit nicely around each other, a lot of times the jars will clink. So it used to be that grandmas would put like a jar of water in there to keep them from clinking. You can actually take that water out. It's sterilized. It's been canned, and you can put it on the shelf and use that for drinking water. If you do that, be careful about where you store it because it's very heavy. And, you know, that's just one way that you can actually store water is to actually fill your canning jars with water when you do your canning, your extra jars, and just store water in them. And it works great. Okay, so is there anything else? So when you're living off grid, you want to be careful about your water usage. You don't want to be using water for hygiene. You want to be using water for drinking. And here's the other thing. You want to be using a pressure cooker. Do you know what a pressure cooker is? It's like a pressure canner, but it's smaller and it doesn't have all the dials and everything. It just has an on and off, steam, vent, or pressurize. When you're off grid, you want to be using as little fuel and as little water as possible. The way to do that is with a pressure cooker. What happens with a pressure cooker is you put in like an inch of water in the bottom and you put in a steamer basket on top of it. And the steamer basket keeps any food from burning on the bottom or getting overcooked and mushy. Now, how much time does it take to cook a whole batch of boiled potatoes? It takes 10 minutes of pressure on time, and then you turn it off. How long does it take to cook a normal batch of potatoes? Bringing the water up to heat, letting it cook, and then being done. It takes about 45 minutes. If you have a half a pot full of water and you're boiling potatoes, it takes like 4 or 5 times as much fuel to do it in a normal pot than it does in a pressure cooker. So again, pressure cookers, you put this much water in the bottom, which is like maybe 3 cups, 2-3 cups in a gallon and a half pot. Steamer basket in the bottom, essential. Keeps things from getting soggy. You put the lid on, you close the lid, you turn your fuel on. It very, very, very quickly comes up to pressure. It's at pressure for 10 minutes, you turn it off, and there's your meal. You can do the same thing with roast. Rather than having a lot of fuel going into cooking into meat for like hours. If you put a roast in the oven, it takes hours to cook it. If you put it in a pressure cooker, it takes it really depends on what kind of meat you're going in, because you need to look at your safety sheet and how long it needs to go. But 45 minutes is about how long it takes to make a pot roast dinner, as opposed to like 2 or 3 hours in the oven. So it really takes down your water consumption. It takes down your fuel consumption, because water is really intensive when it comes to cooking fuel or heating fuel. And if you're in an off-grid situation, you need to be as careful with your fuel as you are with your water. All right, let's see. Kathy Cook said, had to haul all water for a year, no plumbing. I found how little water it takes for shower and dishes, etc. Now I have all I want. I still use very little. Yeah, it becomes very much a habit after you've been off grid for a while. The color drop said, I like to put gauze in the water that I can for sterile wound cleaning. And then do you just dry it, or do you only boil it right there as somebody is hurt? Hobby Woodworker said, unscented chlorine bleach is good at sanitizing for brewing. I watered it down and soak containers I brew wine and beer in it. It off-gases chlorine rapidly after dumping the sanitizing water. No taste. Great point. Chrissy Ferguson said, sun oven will sterilize water as well. So I do have a sun oven, and I have used it repeatedly when we were off-grid. We used it the most in 2019. And it does work, and it works great. You can sterilize water in a sun oven. I feel like sometimes people don't realize how much water, even if you're not using it for hygiene, how much water you really go through just for drinking in a day. And even though you can do it in a solar oven, the quantity that you can do in a solar oven is so small that I would not rely on it as a realistic source of anything. If that sounds horrible, I'm really sorry. I think that a solar oven, a sun oven, is a great thing to have on hand if you already have other things in place. If you already have several nice big 5-gallon canisters of propane, then I think you could start thinking about a solar oven as a possibility for summer cooking. With a solar oven, you have to be home to move that oven and follow the sun to some degree. It doesn't take more time in a solar oven than it does in a conventional oven, as long as you have good sunlight that day. And I have cooked whole dinners in a sun oven, just whole dinners. And we've done cookies and we've done bread, and it's been fantastic. At the same time, I have more efficient tools, more efficient and less expensive tools that do a better job at certain things. For instance, in the winter, my wood burning stove heats my whole house. It boils water, it cooks pig food, and it cooks food for me, all on the wood stove. So in the winter, I want to have a wood stove. In the summer, I don't really want to have my wood stove on. It heats the house up. It's a little bit of a struggle. But I'm really glad I have it in the summer, just in case. The attachment on the side of my wood stove is a propane stove. The attached to the side of my Elmira wood stove is a propane cooktop. It's not an oven, but it's a cooktop. And so I can bring a 5-gallon canister of propane in, attach it to my wood stove, and I can still do canning. I can still heat up water. And when we were off grid, that's exactly what we did. I just used the wood stove in the little cabin. I didn't use the wood stove part of it. I didn't even have it hooked up, but what I used it for was like a cooking surface in my cabin. And what I used to cook with was my little propane attachment that was on the side of my wood stove. I used propane. I had another little wood stove that was smaller, that was a better size for my cabin. And it was a rocket stove, and it works fantastically. And it had an oven on it. That was great. But the solar oven that I experimented with and tried, you can't have any trees or tall buildings wherever you're going to put it to cook. It took 3 hours to cook a chicken dinner, full chicken. It had to be thoroughly thawed chicken. It could not have any cold left in it. Thoroughly thawed chicken and potatoes and carrots. I did like a really nice dinner in a double-decker, the pan that comes with it. And it was fantastic. And it was only 3 hours. But on a day where we were a little bit overcast, it just wasn't coming up to heat and it wasn't cooking. And so to rely on that as the only thing that you have would mean that you're needing to eat dry goods without cooking them if you don't have propane or some other way to do it. So, and I have one. I will say I do have one and I do use it, but it is a luxury, not an essential part of what I do. Let's see. Wild Edible said, I cook roast mostly in spring and fall in the oven to use it as a heater for the house. Exactly. And that's what we do. We do a lot of cooking on the wood stove in the winter. We cook the pig food. We do other things, but we don't always. Some, propane and electricity are a lot more convenient even than a wood stove, because you have to get the wood stove up to a certain temperature in order for it to cook efficiently. And if you have a regular wood stove, not a fancy one like mine, we got ours for dirt cheap. We got it for cost. Otherwise, we would never have bought it. It's a $7,000 stove, and we did not spend that kind of money on it. Not even close. But if we had a regular little wood stove, you can still bake on it. You can still cook on it. You can bake in a pressure cooker. Did you guys know that? You can bake in a pressure cooker. You can also bake in a Dutch oven. And so it's more about education than it is about necessarily expensive, fancy tools. Let's see. Katie Moyer said, are you canning the dry gauze? That would make it sterile and storage durable. Southern Prairie Homestead said, hello, everyone. Beautiful Homestead said, good morning. Cynthia said, when I lived in Jordan, every house had rooftop water tanks, and the city turned them off every 3 days. We used gray water for everything after washing up, for flushing toilets, garden, and reboiling. So when we were in the off-grid cabin, we had a lot of dish soap water. We got really good at having very little waste on the plates when we went to wash them, because we didn't want to use very much water. And what we did is we took our little pan of dishwater after we had used it, and we went and dumped it underneath the outside shower. And because of the soap we had in it, we did not use it on plants because it would kill the plants. Even though we were using something that was bio-friendly, more than just a teeny tiny amount of soap will kill most plants, even trees. And so if you're going to do something like a gray water system, really, really research your soap. And that's a good point bringing that up. For our shower water and for our dishwater, our hygiene water, we used a gray water system because we didn't have a septic. We were off grid. And that worked great. What we used for our shower system was one of those 2-gallon chemical sprayers. 100% clean from the store, never had chemicals in it. What we would do is we'd fill it up halfway with cold water, because you never want to boil or heat all your water. You want to add boiling water to cold water because you're conserving your fuel. So we'd fill it up halfway, a gallon of cold water, and then I'd go in and I'd boil 1 tea kettle of water, and I'd pour the water in until it was the right temperature. Shake it, put the sprayer on. I'd have my kids come out into the shower, and I would spray my kids off and have them soap up. Off-grid outdoor showering is much easier if you have someone to help you, if you're going to use one of those spray containers. We did try other ways to shower out there, and they just used so much water. The high pressurized spray container is amazing because it uses so little water. A whole family can shower with 1 gallon of water because the spray nozzle is so pressurized. So we would all help each other shower when it was time to shower. Because you want to do it quickly. So I'd spray the girls down, and they would be getting soap everywhere. They'd be getting soap everywhere. And then they would start to turn in a circle, and I would spray them down with the spray attachment for the nozzle. Spray, turn, spray, turn, spray, turn. And so it takes like a minute and a half to spray down 2 kids. And then if John was available, or if I was available, John and I would shower together and spray each other down because it was just so much faster. And we did not wash our hair every day. We washed our hair once a week. And with that, you would need a big bucket to dunk your head in. And that definitely took more water. And then we always wore our hair in braids to keep our hair cleaner. And we would brush our hair every night. And at night, what we would do is that if it was too cold or we didn't want to go outside to the shower, what we would do is we pour warm water into a bowl, get a washcloth, wring it out, and do a washcloth bath. And then the last thing that you wash is your butt and your crotch. You start with your face, then your armpits, wash up from your ankles, and then rinse it out, squeeze it out in your bowl of water, get it as clean as you can, and then you do your crotch and your butt. And if you're doing off-grid laundry too, I would highly recommend having particular washcloths that you keep separate for your butt and your crotch, and wash those separately and boil them. Always boil your washcloths when you're off-grid, just because they are a great way to get people sick if there's cross-contaminations. Have washcloths for dishes and have washcloths for hygiene, and keep them separate. All right, let's see. Let's see what I missed. Hobby woodworker said, on my farm overseas, I had 18,000 gallons above ground concrete storage for water. The entire house, roof, and garage and shed roofs fed all of their rain gutters into it, which is awesome if you have rain. In our area, we do not have rain. We get snow in the winter, and that's about it. And all our water comes from the mountains in our flood irrigation system is how ours works. And so our water is actually in a little jeopardy here in our area because they're trying to close that down. They're trying to close down the flood irrigation systems that recharge our aquifer and keeps our water higher. So our well may need to be drilled much deeper over the next few years if they get rid of that. The color drop said, gauze directly in the water to use as needed. We use them a lot for camping. The water and gauze are both sterile. That's awesome. Great planning. Southern Prairie Homestead said, living in Florida, water is not an issue. We have an Israeli water purification system and also one from the U.S. Navy. Awesome. I think knowing your local region and what you need to have on hand and how to make things work. If you can't have a continuous supply of water, make sure you store a lot more water than what I have here. I know I have a hand pump, so I still store water because it's so much more convenient to just grab it from downstairs than to have to go out and pump it if I needed to. When the power goes out for a short amount of time, I run down, I grab a 5-gallon bucket, we put it upstairs next to the sink, and we do exactly what I've been talking about here, is that we have a little bowl of water, we pour some water in with a teeny, tiny, tiny bit amount of chlorine in it, and then everybody washes the visible dirt off their hands, and then we use the sprayer to wash with clean water. But it takes so little water with that sprayer. It saves you so much water, keeps you from getting each other sick by using too much water, touching things when you're in an off-grid situation. Cleanliness is so important. Let's see. Jennifer said, I like that bunker. I have a similar space in our basement. Is that a cot or a bunk bed? So this is actually a backpack. I used to have several of these. This is a backpack that folds out into a cot. So it's like a bug out. It's like a bug out bag that we keep you up off the ground instead of needing to have a foam or something else to sleep on. This fully folds out into a cot. My kids like to use it when we're camping. The Smith said, I use dirty water from laundry and dishes to dump on grass and weeds in my gravel driveway. That's a fantastic use for it. Because it has soap in it, it kills things. It kills things in your driveway. If you put it on your garden, it will kill your garden too, so don't put it in. I may have to go get a drink. Hold on a second, guys. Surrounded by water. All right, sorry guys. Working on it. Kind of a tight space. Now, I do try to keep our storage areas very clean and kind of cute. This did not always used to be cute. This is burlap that I bought, and I just stapled it because the insulation was exposed and it wasn't very pretty. So I try to make it clean. And then I have carpet on the floor, so then when we walk in to get water, it doesn't hurt our feet because the concrete is cold. All right, let's see. Tamara said, good morning, having 2 basins to wash. Where's one to wash ears, one to rinse? Okay, Tamara, can you say that again? I'm sure I'm just misunderstanding it. 2 basins, one to wash ears, one to rinse. Yes, exactly. What we would usually do is have one bowl of water, squeeze, rinse or wash with the washcloth, and then squeeze, and then we would dump that water and get a new bowl of water. But having one side by side would definitely make things faster for sure. Southern Prairie said, on our rural property, we have a gallon steel water containment tank. We do not use plastic because of leaching. And that's what my dad had in their homestead. He went and bought an old used milk tank. It's stainless steel. And it would fill the tank. The water would use that. The house would use that water. So that was like, I don't think that was the pressure tank, but it was a storage tank, and it was 500 gallons. And that's what my dad had in our root cellar when I was a kid. All right. Barefoot Farmer. Hey. I'm glad you are here. Cynthia said we converted a hot water bottle with a shut-off adapter and hung it up for showers. And do you feel like you get enough water and enough pressure? That's the thing, is when we used other systems, you had to keep refilling the original container. And sometimes the pressure was so bad that you really didn't feel clean when you were done. With the chemical sprayer, with the wand attachment, you 100% get clean because it's a high pressure. It's very little water, but high pressure. So it's like a pressure washer for you. And they only cost like $20, $30. I always have one on hand, even though we don't live off grid anymore. I always have one on hand. Again, one that's never been used for chemicals. Southern Prairie Homestead said, LOL, I wash my hair every 2 to 3 days and cut it short. Wonderful for the heat. Yeah, and you have to make adjustments like that for your situation. For us, long hair works better, just because being able to braid it is kind of a big deal. Just because of the texture of our hair, it doesn't work well when it's short. Julie Wolf said, I remember my grandma washing herself down with a cloth. Yeah, and it works great. You feel very clean afterwards. At the time when we were off grid, I was doing a lot of YouTube videos, so I was wearing a lot of makeup. So for me, it was really essential that I actually had like running water type of water on a regular basis to get the makeup off. And so that's why the pressure pump system, even though I could use the washcloths, and I did use the washcloths when our nights were cold enough, because our shower was out on the deck, and even though there was plastic around it, it could be a little chilly. If it was that cold or we were that tired, we'd just use washcloths. But for the most part, we tried really hard every night because we were farming. We were getting very, very dirty. And sometimes a washcloth bath just doesn't feel like it's enough when you're really dirty. And so we really appreciate that pressurized system that was light enough for me to carry it and light enough for me to use. Tamara said, in Barbados, the government pumps all our water, which we have to pay for, and living in a rental, harvesting was the only solution we have. A drought season as well. I think that's brilliant. And necessity is the mother invention. It really is. I needed some water. Like I said, surrounded by water and none to drink. Joanne said, shower as a woman needs to be private, I think. Use gravity. Bikers know how to shower. A big jug over your head. I do it for camping. Blessings. So we have an outdoor shower. We built what kind of looks like a little outhouse. And then we also plasticed in our deck on our tiny house when we were off grid. And if you use, so I can bathe 4 people with a gallon of water. 4 people. If I use the pressurized system, and you're sparkly clean when you're done. If you are just pouring water over your head and it's a gallon of water, if you're in a water shortage, that's a lot of water to use on one person's shower. Even if we're doing washcloth showers, I can bathe 4 people with 1 gallon of hot water with washcloth showers. So if you're concerned about emergency water, these pressurized chemical sprayers will save you so much water. So much water. They work so well. The misting setting is the one that I like. Off grid with Doug and Stacy. Hello, hello. Julia said, I remember the men folk bringing a metal milk can full of spring water to the kitchen for grandma to use. Yep, exactly. Cynthia said, camping stores have the bags with the shower head. Pressure was enough to feel clean. The thing is with the camp, and the only reason I say this is because we're talking about water stores today. If the only water you have is like this, where you've only got like maybe 50 gallons of water in storage and you don't know how long you're going to be out of power and thus out of water, every drop of water counts. Every drop of water matters. And so those hanging bags, you can't like direct the flow, really. You need to be able to direct the flow. And also it's heavy to lift over your head. Whereas with these pressurized systems, you set it on a bench next to you, you pump it, and then you can spray for like 30 seconds, maybe 45 seconds before you run out of pressure. So what I do is I spray, I put soap, I turn it off. It has a little trigger on it that lets you turn it off. I put soap on, I pick the sprayer back up, I turn it back on, and I spray. And the reason it's important is because if you only have 50 gallons of water and you don't know when that power is turning back on, you cannot afford to not direct that water to exactly where it needs to go and still get clean. Does that make sense? I mean, we did this for 3 years. We got really, really good at not having to haul more water because my 6-year-old was the one that went out and pumped the water and hauled the water in gallon jugs from the well. And she was getting about 20 gallons of water a day. And so that's 10 trips to the pump, pumping the whole thing herself. And that was a close well. I mean, it was only like 30 yards, maybe 40 yards from our house. But for a 6-year-old, I couldn't be the one pumping water because I'm the one in the house cleaning and cooking and making a living and straining goat's milk and things like that. And so it had to be children, and they were only able to haul 1 gallon at a time to haul it. And it's a significant amount of work. Every gallon is a significant amount of work. Southern Prairie Homestead said, hot tap portable water heater hooks up to solar generator. Boom. Hot shower can even use propane. I have used those before. And what I found was that the inconsistency of when the water was going to heat up meant that I was running the water and it was cold water. You can hook it up to a hose. So if you have power and if you have solar panels, yes, you can hook it up to the hose, and that does work. And so if you have that kind of setup, you can totally do that for sure. As far as water goes, I don't like to leave things to something like solar. I like to have a backup that's completely 100% manual. And if you're on a system that doesn't have pressurized water anymore, you wouldn't be able to run one of those because it's a pressurized system that runs from like a hose being hooked up to that. And I have used them before. We used them quite a bit when we were on our trip. A lot of the off-grid places that we went and stayed and did interviews had that kind of system. and it used a lot of water. It used so much water because the heating element part of it was not consistent. It would be really, really cold and then really, really hot, and then really, really cold and then really, really hot. So it was really hard to stand under the water because you're getting burned 1 minute and you're getting frozen the next minute. And so it actually used a ton of water because you couldn't get your body under it and you had to stand away from it and try and fiddle with it. And because you were fiddling with it, the water was running the whole time. So I don't like those on-demand water systems because they're really, they go through the propane pretty quickly and they go through water way fast. So it really kind of depends on how you're doing it. Okay, my computer is about to die and I don't want to lose the stream, so I may have to run. Let's read this really quick and then I have to go. Yes, you can take a full shower, shave, and everything on 1 gallon of water in the sprayer. Yes, exactly. Back to Earth Natural Homestead. You need to boot camp your kids someplace. We are doing an Airbnb here this summer starting in May. So if you want to learn how to do everything we do, our little cabin is open. Okay, how do you do water-free toilet situation while menstruating? That's not an issue at all. You get one of those little bottles they give you after you have a baby, and it's a squirt bottle. You fill it with water. You squat over your toilet. You rinse yourself off. I have a video about it. It's about toilet paper alternatives, and my computer's about to die. I'm so sorry. But you use one of those hygiene bottles with the nozzle. You squeegee it. You squeeze it over the toilet, rinse all the blood off. You can have specific washcloths that you use just for menstruation and just for cleaning your bum. And those are the ones that you have a special pot that you boil them in when you do laundry. You do, I wonder if I should just go plug it in. Oh, and Off-Grid and Doug and Stacy said their water shower is awesome. They do have a cistern and plenty of water where they are. So I have to run. Yes, Tamara said we just heat a gallon of water and add it to 5 gallons to bath 5 people. Yeah, if you have the water, it's not a problem. I'm just talking about like in a really big emergency.